Board of Supervisors back to order. Let the record reflect all members are present and the quorum shall continue from this morning's actions. We're going to bring agenda item 14B from this morning up real quick for final discussion. Mr. Reese.
Good morning or evening, Madam Mayor. This is Todd Reese, Deputy DA for the record. This morning, you asked me to work with DIDS on a particular paragraph of the corrective action plan. We did talk with DIDS and I believe worked out our differences. In doing so, there is no need for a language change to the corrective action plan.
So just for clarity of motion, I'm willing to then accept a new motion just to approve the corrective action plan as submitted. So if somebody would like to make a motion, that would be wonderful.
I move to accept the corrective action plan as submitted.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Thank you very much. That's great for clarity. We'll move forward with our Public Defender's Office. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 25A, which is possible action and a discussion on a proposal from Anderson Collard Ranch Enterprises LLC concerning a tentative subdivision map known as Anderson Ranch West. Ms. Manzo, are you going to take us through this, please?
I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? Good evening. There we go.
Better.
Okay, Heather Manzo for the record. Okay, so before you this evening is we're bringing back a recommendation coming up from the Planning Commission on this tentative subdivision map known as Anderson Ranch West. As you'll recall, it's located north of Kings Canyon and to the west of North Ormsby. I did want to note that we did have an acreage correction. Legal notice has been provided, but we did verify that the total acreage of the site is 80.03 acres, not the 80.53 that was noted in the staff report. So I just wanted to make sure that we got that on the record. In terms of potential density for the site, it remains exactly the same. So I updated the acreage as shown on this screen, and the total potential is 132 units still. So upon initial review, the Planning Commission in September could not make 3 findings. These findings related to code compliance and streets and highways design, as well as provision of accessibility and availability of fire protection services. So those are the 3 findings the Planning Commission could not make. We brought that to the board in November. And in between the Planning Commission and board, there were some changes to the design that the applicant had presented to the board. The Planning Commission hadn't had the benefit of seeing those changes to see whether or not it would make any difference in their ability to make the findings. So the board did turn it back over to the Planning Commission for further consideration. What I'm showing now is the old site plan, which showed primarily just 2 access points going on to North Ormsby. So one of the comments was there's a lot of access points from this development and one across the street to the east that could potentially create some conditions that were not ideal. So the applicant had revised their access plan to provide one access from their site onto Ormsby, and that one does line up with the Ash Canyon project to the east that was approved by the board. So in response to finding number 6, there were some concerns about how the common open space had been calculated and where it was located. And so what the applicant did is provided me with a table of where their common open space areas were within the proposed 61-unit development. And one of the noted concerns was that detention basins really shouldn't be counted toward common open space. So in evaluating the acreage that the applicant had sent over as an update, they hadn't before, and they still are not proposing the detention basins as part of their open space acreage. The common open space areas are the 30-foot wide areas on the north, west, south, and along the east side of the project. Those are 30-foot wide areas with a multi-use pathway within that area and landscaping. So that's one of the common open space areas, and then there's also the park site that they're proposing. So those two areas consist of 3.89 acres, and as the applicant had noted, it far exceeds what was required by the 17.10 common open space development. So the project, as part of their common open space areas, would provide for multi-use pathway connections via 30-foot wide corridors and easements, in addition to some improvements along Kings Canyon, which roadway improvements are required. However, a separated trail system was recommended because of the grade at Kings Canyon. So the applicant had incorporated that into their project design, as well as the common open space within the 61 unit area. So these connections that are being added as a part of this project would provide east to west continuity to serve the overall area, connecting multi-use trail access to the west, or from the west to the east, and would also provide for additional access to public lands via the multi-use pathway system. The board was presented with a modified plan that reduced the connections to Ormsby and would also line up with Ash Canyon as shown on the upper right oval. That other piece on the lower right side is the Planning Commission had some concerns about the remainder parcel and whether or not secondary access or secondary emergency access in particular could be provided to the remainder parcel, so that it would meet code without any special exceptions in the future once that were to come in for development. So what the applicant did is they provided a site plan showing that there's 95 linear feet of frontage on the remainder parcel along Ormsby Boulevard. And speaking with Public Works, their collector street design is about 60 feet wide. The right-of-way is 60 feet wide. So that 95 feet can both accommodate emergency access as well as primary access, should that be something that is proposed in the future. So on April 26, 2023, the Planning Commission reconsidered the request. And at that time, with the materials that had been presented to the board and sent back to Planning Commission, the Planning Commission was able to make findings 8 and 11, which relate to the access and street design. After consideration, there was a unanimous vote of the Planning Commission to recommend that the board deny the tentative map request based on their inability to make finding 6. And they discussed several different aspects of how they thought that it didn't comply with the intent of code. So those are outlined in the staff report, and I'll go through them briefly here as well. So these key areas really had to do with the fact that this would be the first common open space development that proposes an overall subject site where a large portion of that subject site was not going to be presented for development now. So it leaves a 50-acre remainder piece that really the Planning Commission just had questions as to whether or not that even conforms with code or whether it could conform to code since we don't have a plan before us. In addition to that, because the entire site was proposed as part of the request using 17.10, it shifted density from a portion of the property that it's just not proposed for development now. In addition to that, there was a 9.46 acre private open space area that the applicant had identified, proposed around the existing ranch house on the remainder parcel. The Planning Commission felt that it was a good idea to preserve that area, but there wasn't really enough detail in what had been presented by the applicant to really, I have a good idea as to what benefit it would have and what potential impacts there may be doing that. In addition to that, that 9.46 acre piece is separate from the subject area that's being proposed for development. So they felt that there was a disconnect between what was being proposed and what was being presented for development at this time. In addition to that, the Planning Commission had noted that the 30-foot wide corridor along the north and west boundaries would create a tunnel type feel if there were fences on both sides of that 30-foot wide corridor. So they noted that there might be some safety concerns related to that. And then lastly, the Planning Commission had noted that they felt that there was a really big missed opportunity not amenitizing and bringing Ash Canyon Creek into the development, like the development that's to the southwest of this site. As it is presented, that the Ash Canyon Creek is separate from the site and will be kind of a dividing line between the proposed development and the creek itself. So it's not an amenity, it's kind of just a separating point. So those are the items that the Planning Commission noted in the record in terms of not being able to make finding 6. So as such, the Planning Commission is recommending that the board deny this request. That concludes my presentation, and Mark Forsberg and Dave Snellgrove are here with the applicant to make a presentation if the mayor and board wishes.
Does any member have any questions of Heather at this point? No? Okay, your presentation, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the board. I'm glad to be in front of you. I appreciate in advance your consideration of this application. We've been through a lot getting here today. I also want to thank staff. They're incredibly professional and hardworking, and have done a good service for the city. So I just want to start by, I know I've gone over some of these things before, but I think in the interest of having all the supervisors here, I'm going to kind of repeat some things that I brought forward at the last supervisors meeting, and just for the benefit of the record. So the ranch in question here was acquired by the Anderson family in 1876. And that's when the ranch house there on the that still stands on the 50-acre parcel was constructed. Kim Anderson was the daughter of Andy Anderson, and she's married to Dennis Collard. So Kim and Dennis, through their LLC, are the owners of the property and the applicants, and they lived there part of the time, and they have taken care of it for many years. The family, the Anderson family, has had a long and productive relationship with the city over the years. Currently, the city buys some of the ranch water rights and uses them for city purposes. In the past, the Andersons and the city had a deal for a water line easement in which the Andersons got some treated water and the city got the easement. I think Supervisor Horton's familiar with that. It was in effect for, I don't know if it was a century, but it was a long, long time. And then the city didn't need the water, didn't need the easement anymore, and canceled the deal. And more recently, we were working with the city to sell a water line easement for the water line that carries Minden water up to the Quill treatment plant. And then when the Andersons filed an application for a parcel map, that became a condition of approval of the parcel map, so the negotiations to sell it were terminated. After we were before you the last time, we came to recognize that it was unlikely that we were going to get approval, and you gave us the opportunity to go back to the Planning Commission with some changes. And one of the changes that we made, as Heather has described to you, was we reconfigured the project a little bit, because by now you had approved Ash Canyon, and those approved entry points into Ormsby conflicted with our plan. So we redesigned our plan down to one entry point. We moved a few things around to create some wider streets in certain places. And the owners, the property owners, thought it would be a good idea to offer open space surrounding the ranch house, because it's a historic building. It's been there for 140 years or something, and they thought that was a good cultural resource and would help with the idea that we're not in compliance with the purpose statement of 1710. So we put that in there, and we tried to work out the details of perhaps a conservation easement. We weren't able to achieve that with staff, but nonetheless, it was an offer that was made to try to create more open space. It's private open space, but it's permitted by 1710 to be private open space, and it would have been there in perpetuity. But neither staff nor the Planning Commission nor the public saw any real value in it, so that was essentially withdrawn from our proposal at that time. Again, we did solve the problems regarding traffic, fire access, and really everything else that the Planning Commission raised at its first meeting, in addition to the changes we made for the second meeting. And they again denied the application. So in my estimation of what they did, they focused entirely on finding 6, which is whether this project conforms with the master plan and the zoning ordinances. And just as a background or tutorial, I guess, I'm sure I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but master plans are plans, and the Nevada Supreme Court has phrased it as a master plan is, after all, a plan. It's not a straitjacket, and it's not meant to be something that is that strictly enforced. And what it's intended to do is be a guide to whatever entity has adopted the master plan. And the implementation of that master plan is done through ordinances, the zoning ordinances in particular. So here, this project complies with the density requirements of the master plan. Part of this property is zoned low-density residential, which allows up to 3 units per acre, and the rest of it is zoned single-family 12,000, which allows, what did I say, low-density?
You said single family, it's medium density.
Pardon me. It says LDR, so I assumed it meant low on the chart. But in any event, read in conjunction with 1710, we're not increasing the density at all. We're not increasing the number of dwellings on the property by even 1. So in that regard, I believe that read together, those two things, the master plan and 1710, bring this into compliance. And so I think objectively, and not making decisions based on wishing to keep this parcel undeveloped or thinking it's not nice enough or that the open space is insufficient, we have met those requirements. So I think that's fairly objectively clear. We've also met all the requirements of 1710, and we wouldn't be here if we hadn't met the requirements of 1710. Again, the project is limited to the number of units allowed by the current zoning. That's a specific requirement of 1710. We've met the requirements for common open space, for private open space, for setbacks, for lot size. We've followed the transfer of density concept that's proposed in the purpose statement of 1710 to a T. And we've provided exponentially more of these things than the ordinance actually requires. So objectively, I would suggest to you that we've met the requirements of 1710. Therefore, I think we've met all the standards to make the necessary findings, including finding 6, which couldn't be made by the Planning Commission. I think that a lot of the objections that the Planning Commission voiced in turning us down are not really truly based on either the master plan or the ordinance. The things they said, and I took notes, one planning commissioner said this should be a PUD. Well, that's not a basis for turning down an application that's brought forward under a different ordinance. Another one said that he or she thought it was not a nice enough project and they really wished it could be nicer. Again, we don't know how to meet a standard like that. It's certainly not in the master plan or in the ordinance. The complaints about the width of the trails, that's not a standard that's in any ordinance or the master plan. So we don't comply with it if someone thinks it's too narrow or it's got a certain feel. It's just not a standard that we're required to meet. It may be a personal choice or a personal opinion. The issue that has been kind of haunting us all the way through this is that there's objections both here and at the Planning Commission that the 50-acre parcel is not submitted for development at this time, and of concerns that it's going to morph into something terrible or that is not compliant with the master plan or with any ordinances that would apply to it. And that's simply not true. Anytime that property is developed, it's going to have to comply with whatever the law is at the time, whether it's zoning requirements, open space requirements, whether it has to be a PUD, any of those things will have to be met at that time. And I would suggest to you that just because we don't have a plan and the owners do not have a plan, they do not plan to develop it. But I can't sit here and tell you that it'll never be developed because no one can predict the future. It could be sold. Someone else could have a different idea about it. But what we have done is we've agreed that it's, by making it part of this project, that it's going to have to come back to you, back to the Planning Commission to be reviewed if there's ever a plan to develop it. And more important, it's now deed restricted so that, again, we cannot exceed the combined density of the two parcels, just as we're doing here. It cannot exceed the total number of 132 that was allowed by the original zoning and the zoning that'll still exist. So again, I think that the Planning Commission, while it had concerns, I don't think that they're properly based in the ordinance or the master plan. And that's the whole purpose of finding 6, that the one that they couldn't make. And I want to also draw your attention to the Ash Canyon project, which is right across Ormsby. It was approved by the Planning Commission on the same night that our project was first denied. And it's a project that came in under 1710, just like this one. It also required a zoning change because as proposed, it did not conform with the zoning as ours does. So they got a zoning change. And what that project did and was approved by the Planning Commission and this board is it doubled the density on the parcel. There's no clustering, as we've been criticized for not clustering. There are no trails on the site. There's far less common open space. There's far less private open space per dwelling unit than our project provides. And since our project adds no additional dwelling units, it does not create any more traffic than the original zoning. It doesn't create any more strain on city services, water or sewer than the original zoning. It doesn't put any more students in the schools than the original zoning. It doesn't do anything that the original zoning or development under the original zoning does. All it does is it shifts some density as permitted by 1710. And again, this shifting of density is in the very purpose statement of 1710 that most of the opponents of this project are going to refer to here because of some other provisions of it that talk about protecting open space and protecting cultural or natural resources. The Ash Canyon project didn't protect any cultural or natural resources. It has no trails. It has none of the things that enhance our project and make it better. Yet, it was approved with smiles and handshakes all around, and ours has been roundly denied. To me, that's disparate treatment of their project as compared to ours, and it's an unequal and arbitrary application of the ordinances. So I'm happy to answer any questions you have about how this is going to work or how it would work. I think that when we've met all the findings and we can explain to you how we've met every requirement of 1710, that there's really a lot less discretion left for you to decide to deny the project. And I think that staff has agreed with us all the way through that we've met all the findings, that we conform to the master plan. And their recommendation to you today for denial is in deference to the decision of the Planning Commission, not because of any change in their professional conclusions about it. So again, I'm just asking you to follow the law, follow your own ordinance. That's something that at the time Anderson Valley or Anderson Ranch East was approved, Supervisor Bunkowski pointed out in his comments about it was that 1710 is the city ordinance. People have a right to rely on it. And that's what we've done. We've relied on it and followed it, and we're asking the city to follow it too. So, happy to answer any questions.
Does any member have a question?
And by the way, Mr. Snellgrove is going to give you some of the details on the project that I've skipped over because I'm talking in more general terms.
Oh,
Between Ms. Manzo's and Mr. Forsberg's presentation, they covered a lot of items. I'm very appreciative of the items that they did cover. So I'll try and go through quickly without being repetitive. Just to be specific on Mr. Forsberg's comment that we conform with what the master plan density is, we're at 2.05 dwelling units per acre with the 29.7 acres and 61 lots on it. That falls within the allowed density range that exists on this portion of the property that we're proposing for development, which is the 29.7 acres to the north. The allowed density range is between 0.2 dwelling units per acre and 3. So we do conform to the master plan relative to the density. We will be capped off at 132 units, and it's tied in with the existing zoning. We'll only be developing on the northern portion where the star is. As Mr. Forsberg mentioned, the purpose statement in 1710 does allow, very specifically says, including density transfers, and that is what we're doing here. We're transferring density up to the north. So at this point in time, the property that will remain at the south is 50.33 acres that the Anderson-Collard family will keep in ranching, as the whole 80 acres is right now. One of the rationales behind having the south part, and actually all of Ash Canyon Creek does fall on that 50-acre piece to the south. That provides livestock water for the cattle. They end up switching the cattle from south to north, so sometimes they use King Canyon and sometimes they're up to the north using Ash Canyon. To go in and say, hey, we want an amenity all the way along Ash Canyon, I can understand the desire, but from a practicality standpoint with an operating ranch to the south and cattle needing access to it, is really not a very safe condition to do that. So there was a good thought that was put in when defining the line at where the development would stop. So again, the 50.33 acres to the south doesn't have anything proposed on it currently, and will continue to operate as an operating ranch until the family decides to do something different, if they decide to do something different. Heather covered this portion great. Finding 6 was the only finding that was left that the Planning Commission could not, and that's conformity with the zoning ordinance and the land use element of the city's master plan. Getting to conformity with the surrounding, and that's part of the master plan and part of findings that have to be made. We've gone and superimposed both the Anderson Ranch West project and to the east of us, the finger that comes out there, that is the Ash Canyon subdivision, which Mr. Forsberg pointed out, that one was approved. So if you look at the overall patterning in the area, there was a desire to see something nicer, prettier, however those comments are to be interpreted. We are conforming with this basic pattern that's out there. Our lot sizes actually range between 14,400 and over 16,000 square feet, which to the north of us, a lot of the smaller lots there are just a little over 12,000 square feet, which you can do in an SF12 zoning, which that is SF12 zoning to the north of us. This does fit in very well with the form and format of the neighborhood. So the purpose statement was covered in that second line. It talks about including density transfer, cluster subdivisions. So we do feel that we've met and exceeded by good margin the open space requirements. And also we have the creek going along, the Ash Canyon Creek, we have the trail alongside of that. So there was a comment or concern about creating a tunnel. We've got some areas that are narrower on the north end and on the western side of the property, but you go over to along Ormsby, you actually have the street that opens, but it'll be a separated path there. And then you get to the south, and I'll cover it in greater detail at the very end of my presentation with a cross-section, that will have the open pasture land to the south. And if anything gets developed there to the south, that whole creek area can then be accommodated in for an open space area, but that's not at this time. Regarding trail connectivity, which is one of the items from your master plan, you have the the Anderson Ranch project, which over on the far eastern side of that is the Mountain Street Trailhead. They've incorporated trails into their subdivision similar to this, but then you can get all the way out to Quill Ranch, but you'd have to go through sidewalks in order to get there. With the addition of this, the blue highlighted trails, these are separated trails from the roadways. You can get on a pedestrian path and go all the way up to the public lands of Quill Ranch. So we do feel that we're kind of the donut hole in the connection from the existing Mountain Street Trailhead up to public lands. If you look at the bigger picture, and this comes from the Parks and Rec Open Space Trail map, it shows the trails going farther up the hill into the U.S. Forest Service land. With the addition and connection from Mountain Street Trail to going towards, is it running out of batteries? What should we do with this here?
It's gonna reboot them.
We'll see if it closes in 10 seconds.
Oof. Sorry.
Oh, it's restarting. Is it? Well, yeah, that slide is, but it's not going to go any farther than that. What's it? Okay. Yeah, and you should have a copy of the presentation. I know there's copies of it out here. It's under late material. So in the requirements for 1710, there is a requirement to provide 250 square feet of open space per residential lot. I can agree with you, that doesn't seem like a lot of open space, and really isn't. When you look at 1709 and it requires 30% of the site be provided as open space, I was at your joint meeting, I understand the concerns about it. However, we're operating under 1710. We do exceed that requirement by 10 times of common open space, things that are going to be publicly accessible. That's inclusive of the park and the linear trails around the site. Another comment on this is that 100 square feet of the common open space area, of that 250 square feet, has to be, per residential unit, has to be provided in a recreational area. So we've got a park area that we're only required to provide 6,200 square feet of park area. We've provided over 12,000 square feet, so we've doubled that. We far exceed that. Another component, we have never included this in the presentation material, but I looked at what the Ash Canyon subdivision did, and they included their private rear yard areas, which we're allowed to do. We had never done that before, but we've got a considerable amount of area within our rear yard areas. Oh, good. I'll go to that slide. Get down to the right place here. Okay, so these are our three basic lot sizes. They range anywhere from 80 to 100 feet in width. And we took a look, we assumed, and we hadn't heard from Lennar, so we figured a 3,500 square foot pad. They figure that they'll probably go 3,500 to 4,000 square feet with their pad. At the smallest pad size, we'd have roughly around 8,000 square feet of rear yard area. At the bigger pad size, we'd have something less. So from a conservative standpoint, we'll probably have between 8.4 to 11.2 acres of private open space, which is allowed to be counted under 1710 as part of your code. This graphic shows you that we are 10 times on the open space, and that's publicly accessible open space, and then we're 2 times on the park area. So the overall will probably end up between the private and the public, will probably end up between 41 and about 50% of this site will be provided in either the common open space or the private open space. Mr. Forsberg went through, and I'll just give you a little bit more detail on the Ash Canyon subdivision. Actually provided a common open space area in their park, which is located in the northeastern corner. There was 8,500 square feet, just over 8,500 square feet of park area for a total of 2.4% of their site. The rest of their open space was in private rear yard areas. We're providing, just in what's publicly accessible, we're providing 13% of the site. It's 3.9 acres of the site is provided in publicly accessible open space. This elaborates a little bit more on the, not creating a tunnel down near Ash Canyon, and I understand and appreciate the desire to see that as a common element. Well, it's going to be there, it's going to be visible, it's going to be open, and at some point there may be something that gets developed on the south side of this, but there's definitely not that occurrence right now. So what this shows is where the lot area is over on the left of this section. We've got our 30-foot trail, and then we've got about another 30 feet before you hit center line of the creek. So to center line of the creek, you've got about 60 feet from the rear lot line of the nearest proposed lots. And then beyond that, you'll have open space that is used for grazing. So that will be a very open area of the site. So we do feel that this project improves the stormwater runoff and collection control system, improve vehicular access through a currently inaccessible area. You have to go up and around the property because it uses an active ranch. Improve pedestrian access through the regional trail connection linking to Mountain Street Trail up to Quill Ranch. This far exceeds the requirements of 1710 in provision of open space. And over 13% of the site will be publicly accessible through open space trails and recreation. So with that, I'll close my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, be available to answer those.
Thank you. Does any member have a question? No? Supervisor White?
Thank you. Several of your maps show a road by the name of LaRue Lane, goes north up to Mason. On the city map, that road shows up as Pardini. Are you intending to change the name of that road?
No, if there was anything there, we picked it up somewhere, and all I can do is apologize for an incorrect name.
Page 801, 802, and 805, I'll call that LaRue Lane. Anyway, just looking for a clarification there. So it appears that what we're really talking about is three different properties. The 29.7, you're going to develop the 50.33 that's going to remain agriculture, and the 9.49 as private open space. Is that correct?
Yeah.
The open space that was proposed to the Planning Commission was part of the 50-acre parcel.
Okay.
It's not a parcel today.
So we're talking about two pieces of property, not three.
Correct.
Okay, well, your language within your text really lays it out as three separate pieces of property.
Well, our offer was to create another parcel that was 9 point whatever acres
So then,
and carve it out of the 50-acre parcel.
okay. I'm wondering, how does ranching contribute to the development on the 29.7 acres?
I'm afraid I don't understand the question. How does it contribute? Is it going to be used for ranching? Is that what the
No.
question? I
No,
don't.
in 1710, properties included in 1710 are supposed to contribute, be integral, and service the residents of the project. I'm asking you how ranching is integral to the project.
Well, the purpose statement of 1710 talks about preserving or providing open space, protecting natural, cultural, and scenic resources. It doesn't say anything about it being accessible to the residents or anything as an active contribution. It can be a passive contribution, just as private open space can be, which the ordinance clearly allows.
So it's passive contribution, how does it contribute to the 29.7 you're going to develop?
It's a cultural preservation issue. It's got a house that's 150 years old.
On page 746, I see a list of streets labeled as public. Are you proposing to deed these roads to the city?
Yes,
Page 804, on your future development bubble map, there's a set of roads there. Are these roads locked into this location?
no. And we, I think, took pretty great pains to explain that we are trying to address the concern about not being able to visualize or envision what could happen on the 50-acre parcel. So we created something that we thought would show a possible way of developing that piece of property. And it's not a plan. It's just a conceptual idea to try to create in people's mind an image of what could possibly happen.
Okay. Five times in this agenda item, the southern parcel is called out as 71 units. 4 times in this agenda item, the southern parcel is called out as 70 units. So which is it, 70 units or 71?
It's whatever is 132 minus 61.
Supervisor White, the ranch house would count as one of those units. So technically, there was already a unit there. It would allow for an addition of 70, and that's on our assumption that the ranch house will remain and will count as one.
So
In that total 50.33 acres, the total number down there can be 71. And that would be inclusive of the ranch house.
I think you mentioned earlier that this really isn't set in stone. If and when it is developed, it'd be developed by whatever the standards are at the time it's developed. So this 70 or 71 is not locked in stone either?
It is locked in stone, yes.
Okay.
From the start of this project, there was an identification that we would deed restrict the overall property to no more than 132 units, which is allowed. That's actually one of the things in 1710. It doesn't allow you to increase the number. If someone were to come in on the 50.33 acre property under a PUD, they could adjust that around and potentially request higher. We've put a deed restriction as part of this voluntarily to hold that number.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
That's it. Does any other member have a question? So in general, I think one of the perplexing components of this project in comparison, because I listened to you compare all the other projects and saying that yours is on par or better than other projects in the area. Can you give me an example in which someone borrowed density from an adjacent or from another parcel that was not actually part of the project development? Where there's a remainder parcel that we don't have any idea what's happening. Can you give me a matching one to that?
I can't. I
No.
don't know if it's ever happened or not. I mean, I think maybe staff being more familiar with, institutional history, I guess, would know, but I am not aware of the ordinance being used in that fashion. Certainly, Ash Canyon did not, and Anderson Ranch East did not shift density.
And I think, I just want to put on the record, that's what makes it, and I think that's where our difficulty is on this project, right? Is no knowledge of what's controlling on the 50 acre other than the fact that the grand total number of units can be 71. We have that control from a deed restriction, but what we don't have is an overall massing for that area, or an overall, what are the streets gonna do and where are we going? And so I don't want to say that the project is the same as the other ones, because the other ones, we had the whole picture. We knew what the final product was gonna look like, and whether or not all the neighbors loved, they didn't love those projects either. You know, in fairness, right? They didn't
agree.
love them.
I agree.
But here, you're asking me or this board, or you ask the planning commission to try and picture this project as a partial, not a complete project, right?
Well-
So you're asking in our mind to consider the 30 acre as if it's its own complete package, and that it meets 1710. And the difficulty for me is I want to look at the 80 acre parcel and make sure I'm getting the intended benefit of 1710. And so then I try to apply what's in 1710, and I look at the overarching, what is the why would I let you take density from the 50 acre without a plan on the protection that you're doing on the 50 acre? That's where I'm struggling.
So
So-
I understand, and that's the reason why we endeavored to create something. The problem for us is in addressing that in the same kind of sort of philosophical way you are, is that the family has no plan to do that. But they're certainly willing to assure everyone, this board and human beings in perpetuity, that it will not exceed 51 or 71 units. And so, again, it's going to have to comply with it, whatever the law is at the time, which I think conceptually is actually a benefit to the city, because we don't know right now what the law is going to be, what the needs of the city are going to be. And so very likely, if it happens in 10 years, it'll be more what's appropriate at the time than it would be if we created a big plan and then never did it. And also, these plans expire. So, you know, if we do a plan and we come here and we get it all approved and nothing happens for 10 years, we won't have a plan anymore anyway.
I get that. Heather, will you put back up the finding 6 rationale from the planning commission, please? And I don't know if everyone on this board, but just for the public's thing, I did watch that entire. You watched, Lisa watched it twice. We all watched it, I'm gonna guess. But I think, again, it's for the benefit of the public, just because we're not at a planning commission meeting, that's their job and their role, and we don't interfere in that, but it doesn't mean we're not watching it and looking to see.
Well, I
what's happening.
appreciate you taking the time to do that. And
It's important.
when I told you what the planning commissioners addressed as to finding 6, many of them just said finding 6 and really had nothing more to add. And some of them said finding 6 plus the tunnel issue with the trail, or finding 6 plus I was hoping for something nicer, or finding 6, and this is really a, like, I can't remember the term, but like a medallion piece of property or something like that, as if, what, I don't know, you know, and that to me is the problem. And So certainly whatever they said, and I think I don't disagree necessarily with what Heather's done, but we're both paraphrasing what was said.
So let me ask in general, your thoughts when I listened is that I meet 1710 and you have no choice. That you don't believe there's any subjective avenue within 1710 for the planning commission nor this board to look at a particular parcel and determine whether it's in, if I go back and look at the front end of 1710, so I'm gonna paraphrase this my own way, right? It is our job, I believe, to say, is allowing you to transfer the density in the best interest of the city. Is it beneficial? Because that's what 1710 is all about. And that's why I'm struggling that you're not giving me the 50-acre parcel.
Well-
That I'm not seeing the whole plan so that I can say it's of benefit to the surrounding residents, or I got something wonderful protecting Ash Canyon Creek. Or I got, so I'm trying to, in my mind, have you tell me why I don't have the right to have my own subjective feeling about whether or not this property is of benefit, what you're recommending to do is of benefit to Carson City. Is that not our, is that not part of 1710, that it has a beneficial,
So
right?
let
I
me
don't know.
just go back to the purpose statement.
Right.
It says the purpose of this chapter is to set forth regulations. So this chapter is the regulations to permit variation of lot size, including density transfer subdivisions, cluster subdivisions. So the purpose of this chapter is to permit that. So we come in and we say, okay, and then it goes on and it creates the regulations, the lot sizes, all the different details that I've tried to express to you and done so incompletely. So we've done all those things. So now, if we've done everything that the regulations the city enacted pursuant to this purpose statement, what is the standard that we are expected to meet when we bring an application? And your view of how to treat it is that we can meet all these things and you can still say no. And that becomes an unmeetable standard for us because we don't know what to do. We don't know what to come before you with. And if we get turned down, where are we? Got to take another shot in the dark. So that's what the ordinance is trying to do, is to give you and to create for us the standard that has to be met, whether it's findings or just meeting these particular regulatory standards that are very specific. There's not a lot of stuff in here that's the subjective health, safety, and welfare or the good of the community kind of stuff. We do have to meet the findings for tentative maps, and that's what
I
the
have the
Planning Commission,
authority.
that's where those findings come from,
Right.
not from this ordinance. But they made all those findings except for 6, which then kicks us back to, do we meet the master plan? Yes, we do. Do we meet all the requirements of 1710 that you could point a finger at and say, you do or you do not meet this standard? We've met them. So there we are. To me, that constrains your discretion.
And then I'm gonna, nope, Supervisor Giomi?
You know, I guess I agree with the mayor in part. 1710 talks about a project. To me, and this was the issue before, this is not a complete project. It is an incomplete project. And that has been and continues to be the struggle that I have. Since I've been on the board and since I've been involved in code enforcement prior to being on the board, I can't think of an instance where 1710 was used that it did not present an entire project for the board to approve. And that's what's happening here. I disagree with a couple of comments the mayor made. Yes, not everyone was happy with the other two subdivisions we're talking about across the street. But it was about 50-50 for the large project, 50 against. Maybe it was 60-40. But I sat at that meeting, much like this meeting in the evening, and my associate Supervisor Bunkowski kept track of
Oh, yeah.
comments for and against. So there were people speaking in favor of it. The project across the street, the smaller project, again, there were comments in support of the changes that the developer made in discussion with the neighbors. That hasn't happened here. And I can tell you that I have had 0 comments in support of this, 0. And while that isn't specifically called out in the ordinance, it has to be considered. I can't ignore that. I can't ignore that I've gotten 50 negative comments and no positive comments. I can't ignore that. Particularly when you slot it against the fact that, to me, it is an incomplete project.
May I ask a question? Just to engage with you on that. If we came back, or we came in initially and had a 132 unit plan that maxed out the density allowable and met 1710, and every single member of the public was against it, that wouldn't work either.
That's not,
So we don't know what the heck to do.
Well,
that's not what he said.
I guess what I'm saying, Mark, is that it's the totality of what you bring forward. You didn't do that. That isn't what's before us. I think another component of this, while it's not required, is certainly a neighborly thing to do, is to talk to the neighbors and ask what might or might not be acceptable to them so you can move towards approval. That's what every other subdivision has done. Public meetings, discussions with neighbors, you know that. I think we can talk about hypotheticals all day. I mean, if you sort of match the perimeter of a project with what is in the surrounding neighborhood, then I think you'd have some people saying, I don't love this because we all want to have open space. But the reality is the property owner has a right to do with their property something. We don't have a right to take that from them. But by the same token, the people who already live there have the right to enjoy their property in the manner that they've been enjoying it and should expect to enjoy it based on the zoning at the time they bought it. So now you've got a property zone, single family, 1 acre. And I know there are people in here who bought their property knowing that that was 1 acre. And now you're putting a 14,000 square foot lot there, which is about 1/3 of an acre. So I think if you want to talk about hypotheticals, I think if you went and talked to some of these folks and said, hey, let's do 1 acre parcels around the perimeter. Let's match what's going on around the perimeter and finish the project its entirety, if we're talking about hypotheticals. And, then maybe you get somewhere.
And so what you're telling me is that you're going to disregard 1710 in service to people who purchased their property believing that those were going to be 1 acre.
No, I'm not telling you that. I did not say that. I first off said right at the beginning that I don't believe this meets the intent of 1710 because it is an incomplete project. I said that right at the beginning. Beyond that, and after you threw a hypothetical at me, I threw several hypotheticals at you. So I'm just offering up hypotheticals just as you did.
It's the result that's important.
Correct. Anybody else? Would you also, for me, put up the required findings for a tentative map, please? So what I'm going to do is take,
All of them?
No.
the findings,
I-
not the ones, the findings that we need to make to approve a tentative map.
If you want to give me a moment to go
Yeah,
online, I can get
I was
that.
just going to tell you.
Okay.
I'm going to take some public comment right now, and then so that you have time to pull that up so that we can review those. Because I do agree with Mr. Forsberg that this body's job is to determine whether or not we can make the findings. And so we'll have those findings on the screen so that we're
Okay, thank you
familiar
very
with what
much.
we're doing. Thank you. Yeah, there should be a sign in at the table over there, and I have one, and I will always take these in order. It's question mark, so I'll ask him. The first one that I have is Denny French. Are you making public testimony on this item? You're welcome.
Thank you. Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. Thank you, Mayor and Board of Supervisors. I sort of took offense at the applicant's suggestion that the Planning Commission wasn't due diligent about their efforts, and they struggled with the same considerations that you are now, but you have the benefit of the press. You listened to that meeting, so you have a chance to hear their remarks and their considerations. The not knowing about several of the situations on it, whether the ranch was going to stay a ranch, whether the house was going to stay a historical whatever. There were just too many what if happens. And I really appreciate your questions because it brought up several of mine. The commissioners are a cross-section of the community, as I was told, and they were picked so that they would represent such. And I think I don't always agree with any board or commission's positions. I might have a different angle, but I have to say they worked very hard at making sure that they were not just being potpourri or just wanting to save the property from development in total. The questions that you came up with are the same ones that I have, but I'd like to say I'm in concurrence with the Planning Commission statement that this didn't meet the mustard, or however else to say it, and that I appreciate your consideration tonight to take their concerns into thought. And when you make your decision, please know that for me, it's real important to know that those commissions that are informing you of community's feelings and such have to be taken seriously. And because you picked them, you really did a good job of picking people. Please take what they said and how they reacted. I think what they've come up today was a whole different monster in the sense that it's just as unsettling as the first. But it's a new thing, and I don't think they fit 1710 at all. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, I have, is it Patty?
I agree with that gentleman. I don't really have anything to add with that, but I did want to say a few meetings ago, it was noted that there's different kinds of housing for all the different kinds of people that live in our beautiful, darling city. I agree with that. However, there are renters and homeowners pay property taxes, of which I pay my fair share to promote everything else that renters don't have to do. It comes out in a different way. So when I don't like something in my neighborhood, I have to put my home up for sale. That's my biggest asset. That is my biggest investment. So if I put it up for sale, I'm going to lose money right out the chute, getting a realtor and moving expenses. A renter, if they don't like it, they give a 30-day notice and they're gone. So I just wanted to clarify that statement from a couple meetings ago. Renters and homeowners, yes, we all are the same. We all need housing, but renters don't pay homeowners property taxes. So thank you.
Thank you. Tammy Gansey? You don't wish to testify? Okay. Next, I have Lynn, maybe, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's.
Ters?
I didn't want to speak.
Don't want to speak? Okay. Dan Leck? No speaking? Okay. Ms. Strasburg?
Well, I guess I should.
Your choice. I'm just going down the list. That's what I do. You got my pattern by now. Just read the list.
Betsy Strasberg. I did submit a written comments for everybody, so I'm not going to waste your time by repeating it. I did find it interesting that the applicant read the purpose but stopped after density transfer. The second half of the purpose is just as important, where it talks about cohesive neighborhoods offering a mix of housing types. And I do agree with the supervisors who mentioned that the existing neighbors bought their homes with the expectation of having similar homes near their property. And I do believe that building 12,000 square feet homes around their property is not going to lead to a cohesive look and feel. I believe that the Planning Commission voted twice on this project, and they did not feel that it fulfilled the intent of 17-10. I don't think that they erred in denying this project, nor did they act arbitrarily or capriciously or abusing their discretion, and they do have discretion. I live near Anderson East. It was a 60-40 vote among the people who presented on January 2020. I remember that day very well, and I had a little, you may remember, I had a little demonstration there. And so I know the Board of Supervisors, some of folks had apprehensions, but it went through, and now we have reality. And the reality is not very good. And this is the same group that is going to develop the other development. So I urge you, I plead with you to please consider the comments of the neighbors who live near the Anderson West as we did and Anderson East. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Please deny this and do not hopefully return it back to the Planning Committee. We've had 4 hearings on this so far. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Nagel, you didn't change your name, Betsy? Not yet? Congratulations. Okay. She got, just thought I.
Holding up the ring to see if
See, that's what I said. Anyway.
Well, she got me. Richard Nagel for the record. I just wanted to reiterate that the Planning Commission voted unanimously. There was no dissenting votes on this, and they were very vehemently about rejecting this plan. And that again says something. I think that we need to take that into account as far as this goes. I don't like the track record that these people have as building. They said one thing and we got drainage ditches behind us in Anderson, West. So again, they have no plan coming up as far as what I can see. And do they stick to it? Well, they didn't stick to it here. What are they going to do over here? These are the same people. Again, I really think that you should reject this completely because they have not shown to be of good character. Thank you very much.
Thanks. The next one I have is Kathy Weiss.
Thank you very much. By way of introduction, my professional career in Nevada has ranged from being an attorney, a real estate developer, a real estate broker, and a rancher, all together with my husband. With all due respect to the applicant, his project that he describes is an 80.53 acre site with zoning low density, medium density, and single family 1 acre density. There is no overall plan like the mayor has indicated. He has the opportunity to file a master plan on the property. If he doesn't choose to do something with the south portion, that 55 acres, he can amend it in the future according to whatever the needs or whatever the situation in the future may exist. But there is no nexus of this property, this less than 30 acre parcel, to the rest of the property. There's nothing that connects. So he has the opportunity, one, to file a master plan, to make this a cohesive project. 2, if he wants to do this property only, he also has the right to file a parcel map. He has not done that. This parcel property is still connected to the rest of the 8 acres. Nor has he filed an application for rezoning in order to take the acreage from single-family 1 acre down to the 14,000 acre lots that he's provided. He could do all of those things before it's appropriate to implement 1710, which has only been grandfathered as to this application. So I would suggest that all those other applications would not come under the purview of 1710. I've read or scanned the 700 to 12,041 pages of documents that support this application. You look at page 706, there is no mix in this portion of the property that's offered by the applicant. They're simply cookie-cutter lots with 20-foot setbacks from front and rear, 10-foot from side, and a 15-foot setback. He would argue that the lot sizes or configuration would comply to the variable housing that's required there. But I submit that that's not the same. The zoning under this property is 1 parcel per 1 acre. If he were to develop this property only, he would be lucky to get 25 homes once you've eliminated the roads, the wetlands, and all of that. The 9 acres in reality have no nexus to this particular development. And all of these issues have been raised at the Planning Commission so that they're not new. They do not have to go back for reconsideration. I would also note that he talks about the southern boundary along Ash Canyon, which is a walkway. If you look at pages of the submission, that is flood detention, flood detention structures.
Thank you.
Thank you for your.
The other half, Ms.
Before you start the clock, could I ask staff a question? The path that goes along Ash Canyon Creek, isn't that already a public easement where the water lines are? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes.
It is. So you,
They'll look it up. We'll
okay,
get
thank you.
Just, your time is starting. Go ahead.
Thank you. Well, first off, talking about the project to the east, I'm pretty sure that 2 wrongs don't make a right. If there were mistakes made, so be it. But what we're here to do now is to correct those if we can. I guess what's most objectionable to me is that the developers are treating this like it's an entitlement. Because the ordinance exists, by golly, they're entitled to transfer density. That's not true. As a previous speaker said, they conveniently overlook the rest of the language talking about the purpose of 1710. And the purpose wasn't to give anybody the right to transfer density. The purpose was to make findings, and that those findings would then justify that density could be transferred. The first purpose was preserve open space. A single-family 1 acre project would allow 24 or 25 home sites. If those homes average 3,500 square feet each, and that would be pretty large, we would still have 90% open space between the front yards, the backyards, and the side yards. So their calculations still don't meet that requirement. Protect natural, cultural, and scenic resources. The creek is a wetland, and it's a wildlife asset, and I don't see anything that they've done to enhance and improve that. The next one was to achieve a more efficient use of land. I don't understand when you have neighbors that have 1 acre parcels or large private parcels to the west and to the north, how this is more efficient by cramming 14,000 square foot lots on there. It also increases the traffic on Ormsby Boulevard. It says another purpose is to minimize road building. This project would actually create more roads on that parcel than would exist if you had 1 acre parcels. It's to encourage stable and cohesive neighborhoods. Well, you've heard from public comment that the neighborhood doesn't really feel that this is a plus. If we're missing something, well, I'll skip that as the clock's running down. The last one was to offer a mix of housing types. Well, I'll tell you what's absent in Carson City right now are 1-acre home sites. You can go right across the street and see the 14,000 ones that exist now. Where are there any 1-acre home sites? They're going to take that alternative off the map. I'd also say that that 9-acre parcel of open space was silly. It was actually going to be 2 homes on 9 acres, and it was private. They would probably be the 2 most expensive home sites in Carson, but there was nothing open about it. And it's just a ruse. It's just, like I said, homeowners, the property owner is entitled to develop their property, but within the reason of the master plan and the zoning. Thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you for holding the evening meeting.
Ms. Johnson? Nope, it's not green. Push it till, there you go.
My name is Abigail Johnson. I live at the corner of Maison and Pardini, Supervisor White. I too noticed that the maps that Loomis Associates had put together were LaRue maps, which is the old name before the Pardini family asked the city to name a street after it. So that's the story of Pardini and LaRue. I'm the one who keeps bringing up the street light issue because I've been told that the north part of, that the Anderson West would require street lights. Our neighborhoods do not have street lights, so we have the advantage of dark skies. And it sounds perhaps trivial in relation to these other comments, but what it speaks to is the character of the neighborhood. And it's sort of, if you excuse the pun, glaring that the Anderson West would, by the nature of Carson City's rules, bring street lights to an area which enjoys dark skies. So I think it's symbolic of sort of the struggle that we have here. I really appreciate your close attention to this and all the work that the Planning Commission has done as well. And I really support the comments that have already been made. Thank you.
Thank you.
How long ago was that street name changed?
You know, I was trying to go back into my memory to think about that. 7 years?
No, it's longer than that, because I was still working for the city, so it probably 12. If I had to guess, it'd be about 12.
Okay, quite a while. Long enough
Yeah.
so I thought Loomis would catch up to it. But
Yeah. Well, it's kind of obvious when you read the street sign, too.
Thank you. I don't have anyone else signed up for public comment. Did anybody not have a chance to sign in that wants public comment? Come on up. More than one. There's 2 seats. Why don't you just come on up so that we can try and get this moving on.
It's green. Are we good to go?
Green is good to go.
I'll make sure to sign your document, Mayor, before I leave. My name is Sean Gallagher. I appreciate all the time and attention that you guys have given this. And I honestly appreciate that the applicant has, not come across as seemingly entirely, excuse me, unreasonable. And I applaud the attorney for the applicant aggressively advocating for his client. I would expect nothing less from him.
His job.
I have no doubt that he's just doing what he needs to do. That being said, this is not a courtroom. The chief deputy DA is not a judge that is here to give all of you jury instructions. And you, good people, are not jurors. This is a hall of representative government. And your elected officials, and respectfully, I'm sure all of you would agree, the vote of the conscience is in fact very, very important to the system. I recognize that there's legal findings and things like that, and maybe there's an appellate process here. I'm not sure what it is. But I take great exception to the fact that things can't be a moving target, or you as the panel, your warm fuzzies about a project are inappropriate. They're entirely appropriate, because that is what representative government is. Looking at everything in its totality from an aerial view and seeing what ultimately is the decision that is going to be best for everything here. the applicant's rights, the homeowner's rights, everybody's faith in government. I got to say that is, at this point, is what is huge for me. It's flat land. It's going to get developed. I want it to get developed. I honestly do. The ranch, I'm sorry to say, it's really not really that well kept, despite the things that have been said. It has not been. I'm tired of the weeds. I'm tired of fighting the growth. I'm tired of having email battles to try and get something handled and be neighborly, because I assure you it has not been reciprocated, but that's neither here nor there. I'll finish with this. It's gone to the Planning Commission twice. It's been denied. Respectfully, I would submit to you that you now kind of have a mandate, because if this project is approved in the current circumstances, I think that's taking a torpedo to the ship that carries all these very reasonable and good people. I don't mean to imply that you, by voting to approve it, that you're harming them, but I mean, I'm saying, I just hope that's considered. And I think it's entirely appropriate if it is. You guys are elected, and we elected you because we trust your judgment to look at things in their totality. And I think you'll do that. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Longshore. Boy, I got to go before this guy next time. He got me twice now. So pretty much ditto on everything said, and thank you very much for your service. And thank you very much for watching the pretty much 3.5 hour grueling planning commission. So you guys know pretty much what everyone's gonna say. I was just taking some other notes on this. You know, this is probably the last project that's going to be under 1710. You know, we're going to sunset it afterwards. And I think we've seen that what happens here between the spirit of 1710, which was good spirited law, and the actual developers and attorneys, what they look at 1710. They don't look at the spirit, they look at the actual decimal points, and that's what we've come to. You know, I wasn't here from the beginning of this, but when I finally got involved, I noticed the verbiage that had changed with the attorneys and on trying to catch people on speaking points and stuff like that. You know, the board here was very generous last time, saying, hey, you've done so much work, you know, maybe get involved with the community, find out what we can do, what we can help with. Well, I think at the start of the last planning commission, they pretty much started off saying, well, we didn't do much, you know, and here's this. And then I pretty much caught something in there that they're like, the planning commission doesn't make the decisions, the board does. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty arrogant, I thought. Anyways, we're here now. Hopefully you've taken everyone's information into perspective and are going to vote this down. I keep seeing them grabbing at straws with the deeded conservation area and the gray area. But like you've all said, it's just not a finished project. You know, and they've said several times, when something gets developed to the south, I'm like, well, if they're using that density, what's going to be developed to the south? They're just going to wait for another law, and then they'll say, well, we already squeezed this in and got high density here. Why can't we do high density there? So there's going to be a lawsuit. You can hear it in the verbiage, whether it's now or whether it's later. I think we just stop it now and fight it now before they put in a high density area, and then we have to try to figure out the next lawsuit on the next high density area they try to put in. So please vote it down. That way we can sunset 1710, and we can start doing things the right way and probably stick to the master plan in this area and get the acre lots, because, you know, they do have every right to sell their property. And if they do, they stick to the master plan. I don't think anyone here really has a problem if the developments are going to match the area instead of just encroaching high density area into a very lovely open spaced area. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
And I'll
Do I
sign
have
that.
any other? Okay, thank you. Would you push the button to be green?
I'm sorry. My name is Bill Horn, and I've been watching this, and you've done a very good job with your questions. Thank you very much. I think if I take a look at it from a logical view, and I don't know the laws well enough, the problem is that you have a single parcel that they are developing, and they are moving the density from another parcel into that. And because they own all the parcels, that looks like something that is reasonable. If the parcels were divided by owners and you were to take a look at the parcel that they're trying to do, they wouldn't be able to do it. And the parcels are going to be divided. They don't have a master plan, and people aren't going to be able to use and occupy property that's a working ranch. And so the reason they don't have a plan is because they're trying to one-ups you on a property that isn't going to be owned by the owners of the project, and the density is going to be not in conformance with the zoning. If they instead had taken the property line and said, we're going to develop down to where we can have that density, they wouldn't even be here. So I hope that you will not only take a look at what the law says and what 1710 says, but the fact that owners are going to change, and you will have a property or a parcel that will be owned by different people, with this used as an excuse to override what your zoning is. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
Hi, good afternoon. This is Karen Stevens, and I would like to say I appreciate all the great questions that the board has asked, and I won't repeat all of the very good comments that were made previous, but I do concur with the Planning Commission and the previous comments that this project should not be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else? Connor?
Just a minute, takes.
No,
takes a
you're
while.
fine.
Press the button.
Nope, you're green.
Robert Barchi, Carson City. There's been a lot of, in my view, excellent comments addressed to the board. I don't know if this will qualify for that. What I see here is that we have a transactional issue, and we're asking for good faith negotiation on the part of both sides, the applicant and the city. The Planning Commission, I've attended those meetings, they have conducted themselves with good faith. You are conducting yourselves with good faith. Gentlemen, if I'm going to say something, I want to say it to their face. If you can honestly say to me, you have conducted negotiations on this transaction from beginning day one in good faith, I apologize. I don't see it. I've heard on the ranch, trust me. That's a shorthand. We can go into detail. I think you know what I'm saying. Instead of negotiating with the planning department, who has said they want to approve this, as I understand it. Quietly, privately, what can we do given the current environment in which 1710 was rejected with grand enthusiasm? Now to say, and you said it to the mayor, you're under 1710, you got to approve it. Okay. The gentleman before me said litigation. I hope not. It doesn't need to be that way. Think about this. Litigation threat does not equal litigation success. You've got history, the slaughterhouse in Dayton, the Supreme Court's decision on that. Public comment is important in the decision process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And I apologize if I got it wrong.
Is there anyone else? Is that a no? Okay, I'm going to bring it back up here. In the standards, after the public comment, if the applicant wishes to make any final comments to address anything from the public comment, you may.
Thank you. I respect people that are here, and I respect their reasons for opposing this development. There are, I think from the comments, a lot of misunderstandings about what the law says and what the project is and what it could be. There are 2 parcels. The ordinance permits the transfer of density from one parcel to the other parcel. They don't even have to be contiguous parcels. That's what we've proposed. What the purpose of the ordinance is. So I think there's a good record that's been made. We've done as a group everything we possibly can to comply with every condition of approval, every single finding in the tentative map list of findings, of which there are far more than you've seen, with every single provision of 1710. I haven't heard anyone here yet or at the Planning Commission meetings say that we are not following 1710 or any provision of 1710. So I think we've presented all the facts and the information and presented the law to you as best we can. And we'll await your decision.
Okay, bring it back to the board for discussion. Who wants to start? Anybody?
I appreciate what everyone has said, and in the Planning Commission meeting and listening to that, there was reference to kind of the moving target and how does one meet it. But I don't see it as a moving target within the purpose of this, within the whole 1710. The idea behind it was that trade, that for this you can do this, but under the umbrella of the purpose of community, of making it the best possible development it can be within the constraints of topography, within the constraints of landscape, character defining features, those kinds of things. You know, part of the purpose includes provide open space, protect natural cultural resources, achieve a more efficient use of land, minimize road building, encourage stable, cohesive neighborhoods, offer mix of housing types, in exchange for. And so I still cannot support this because I don't believe it meets the spirit of what 1710, what that purpose was. Clustering, this isn't a cluster development per se. This, and part of the whole idea of clustering within the master plan was about that, you know, that's what then can have more efficient use of roads, more efficient use of infrastructure. It's not a grid pattern like this is presented. So I can't support this.
Go, Mr. Hort.
I agree with what Supervisor Schutte said. I want to say also that I support development, and I've said it before, development's going to happen whether we want it or not. It's the way that it's done. And we have to be conscious of that, especially as elected officials who represent our constituents. We have to take their voice and their concerns into consideration. And I think it's important that we apply the law, but we also consider the position that we're all in. Again,
I would echo Supervisor Schuete's comments, and I can't support it.
Supervisor
Thank
White.
you. To start with, I would just like to point out that the mission statement of 1710 is not the law. The law follows the mission statement. I don't find any substantial changes in this project, in this application, that alters my position from the last time this project was presented. Along with everything I said the last time this project was in front of us, here's some additional thoughts. Finding number 6, the southern parcel of this project has no demonstrated plan that confirms that it will be contributing to the current proposed project. In fact, it has been repeatedly stated in the documents and here today that there will be no development on the southern parcel. The southern parcel of land contributes nothing to the current proposed project. CCMC 1710-020 states that non-residential uses must be designed, inferring developed, as an integral part of the project and serve the residents of the proposed project. The southern parcel is being used solely to gain its density and is not an integral part of this project, nor does it serve the residents of the proposed project. On pages 804, 807, 809, 811, 818, and 819, all indicate that the structures within the 9.46 acre private open space are part of the proposed private open space. Structures are not an allowed inclusion in private open space. I don't see any comments about reductions for the structures and the driveways. Additionally, the proximity of several of the buildings to one another fail to meet the minimum dimensions called out in 1710-046. I cannot find in the affirmative for finding 6. Finding number 8, the effect on existing public roads. The city cannot finance the maintenance of existing streets, and accepting these streets as public property, as was stated today, will further degrade our ability to maintain our existing streets as well as these new streets. Accepting these streets will further exacerbate the citywide street maintenance funding issues. It is not fiscally responsible to put more roads in the city's inventory. Secondly, not pushing Washington Street through to Washington Street as it has been planned forever is a mistake and will create an overall negative impact on traffic planning. It has been stated today that the number of units for the southern parcel are locked in for the future. How do we accept this element being locked into the future when we do not have a traffic study that confirms they are appropriate for the location? I cannot find in the affirmative for finding number 8. Thirdly, as a matter of confidence in the accuracy of this application, we needed a clarification today on whether it was 70 or 71 units in the southern parcel. We had to have a clarification today as to just exactly how much property are we really talking about. Multiple times in the text, the southern parcel is referred to as 50.33 acres. The maps on page 807, 811, and 820 refer to the southern section as 5.32 acres. On page 737, the southern section is referred to as 50 acres. How much is the southern parcel? Panel 16 from the presentation shows a trail corridor overall width of 30 feet. However, the three elements that are shown are 15 feet, 3 feet, and 10 feet. That adds up to 28 feet. So we have the question, as I stated earlier, over at finding 6. How many acres is the private open space? Is it 9.46 acres, or is it something less after we subtract the structures? If we can't get the numbers together any better than this, how do we have confidence that the geotechnical and the flood studies are correct? How do we really know what's going on here? That's it.
Are you done? Stacy?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing I can say that hasn't been said. The issue with this for me before was that it's an incomplete project. It came back to us as an incomplete project. It's not complete. 1710 talks about a project. This is not a full project. It's just not.
I think that it's the same for me based on all of your comments. I think each person here brought up something of the issue on the project. And for me, it's, I don't want to say that there weren't things that you did that met requirements of 1710, but the overarching issue is there is no benefit on the remainder parcel other than you're taking and transferring density to benefit the other part. You've left, there's nothing benefiting. You did not give us a complete plan. And I asked staff earlier today to find me another one, right? Find me in history where Carson City allows remainder parcels. So that is that typical of a 1710 development? Am I being onerous or asking you to do something that we didn't ask anyone else to do? There isn't any. There aren't any projects that we could find that left remainder parcels. And so that's why I asked you even the question in the beginning, show me another one. Because I need the full picture. When I make decisions up here, I look at the totality of every part of it, right? Are we complying with the law? Is this good for the residents? Is this, you look at everything and all of the decisions matter and everything. Public comment matters. It's not the sole answer. You all know that. It's not the sole answer, but it is a consideration. So when I look at the findings, the first thing though is the application complete? Is the application itself even viable to come forward? And that's really where, for me, I'm with Supervisor Giomi, and I don't think the application itself showed me anything on the 50-acre remainder parcel where you talked about the 9.34, I don't know, whatever, the parcel with the house and the potential barn, and it could get 2. But it's going to be private open space. It's not public open space. So I couldn't even find a beneficial action on the remainder parcel. I was looking for something that was going to benefit the community as a whole if I could get there. And so since that's private, I can't get there because you didn't give me something to support that. The conformity with the zoning ordinance, it doesn't meet it because you're not doing a rezoning. Yes, 1710 has some other answers to borrow density, but you're not doing anything on that parcel that warrants letting you move the density. So I don't think it conforms with the zoning ordinance because you didn't ask for a rezoning from 1 acre to SF12. And as you mentioned, some of the other ones had to do rezoning to get to use 1710. You did not. And so I don't think it fits that. And I don't think the overall application in my mind is complete. So those are my thoughts.
You know, I think all of us up here, myself included, we push at staff all the time. Find a way to yes.
We do.
Find a way to yes. It's not in this application.
I agree with
Ready
that.
to do a motion if you want.
Yep, I'm ready for a motion.
I move to deny the tentative subdivision map based on the inability to meet finding number 6.
I second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Motion carried unanimously. That's not necessary. Thank you. Okay. We're down to final public comment. None? Oh, yes, I do. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anybody else? Seeing that I have no other, let me just double check. Then, what? Oh.
I just want to say that the Planning Commission has some really bright people on there, and I think you did a lot of good choices on the Planning Commission, okay? They really looked at things and they worked hard, and I don't think they were capricious in any shape, form. Or the way, what they did, they really looked at it and they worked it and they talked it over and they listened to everybody and they did their due diligence. And I just want to say that, you know, they are good people. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. There's none other? Oh. Okay. Sorry. Yes, you're entitled.
Thank you. My absence wasn't as long as I had anticipated, so I'm real pleased for that. But I tried to set myself for the fact that you might not come to the same conclusion I did, because I do appreciate and respect you all. I would have taken it hard, but I just appreciate the fact that you let us all speak today and that you listened to the Planning Commission's suggestions and you did your homework, obviously did your homework. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just for the record, the listen to everyone is this was a tentative map, not an appeal. There are two separate issues on a tentative map. It's wide open public comment. So just letting you know why sometimes it's a yes and sometimes it's a no. Okay. No one else? Thank you for signing in. I appreciate that. Then we are adjourned. Thank you for a good meeting. We've had a long day.